Testing. Hey YouTube, somebody give me a sound check. Hey Raised Fish Room, thanks man. Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. Hey thanks. Justin Shepard, welcome to the stream you guys. What's going on for you guys today? Once again, I'm bereft of topics. I'm dependent on the kindness of strangers to give me something to jabber on about. I did have an issue with my 13-gallon rimless. Hey Joel, welcome to the stream. I noticed that I lost 3 endlers, tiger rainbow endlers in that tank. And religion and politics, yeah, okay. We're going to need more than an hour, Joel. I don't really know what happened. The tank is completely overrun with guppy grass, and because of that, hair algae gets in there. And that hair algae blocks everything, including the water flow. That tank only has a thistle pipe intake and outlet for its filtration. And I think maybe the combination of my cats drinking out of it and lowering the water level, and the hair algae blocking the flow. Hey 54 Punchy, welcome to the stream. How's Pam today? I think that those two things combined to create a toxic situation. The tank is small to begin with, and it's completely overrun with guppy grass, so it causes an issue with the fish not having as much water column to swim around in and exist in as possible, but it also allows the shrimp to exist in there with the endlers without the babies getting eaten. And so we've pretty much just played a balancing act with the hair algae and the guppy grass and the water flow, and I think Pam says Pam is cold. I need to go to town and it's snowing, so I don't wanna. Pam, I am 100% with you. Hey Daryl Dimer, welcome to the stream. I'm 100% with you on the cold. I've been studying the woolly worms and the hawthorn trees this year. And I say that tongue-in-cheek because what I've really been studying is other people studying hawthorn trees and woolly worms and whatnot. And I think we're going to have a heck of a winter. It just all the previous prognostications that I've seen so far are a mixed bag for my area. Whether we're going to have a bad winter, whether we're going to have a mild winter. The Farmer's Almanac says we're going to get slammed for winter, but the old Farmer's Almanac says it's going to be a great winter. So it's just a mixed bag in our area, but most of the locals that study things like the bark on hawthorn trees and the height on the fence of the woolly worms and all that sort of stuff, moss on the south side of a tree. All of them are saying it's going to be a heck of a winter this year. And the older I get, the less and less I enjoy really cold, rough winters. We already had freezing rain. Hey, Cobwebs Caverns, welcome to the stream. We already had freezing rain once this year, just a couple of nights ago, and I felt like we dodged a bullet. About 100,000 people in this area got their power knocked out from tree limbs that were over iced falling. There's still leaves on some of the trees, so all that ice buildup was really heavy, and a bunch of trees and limbs fell and knocked out a bunch of power for a bunch of people. And that's always a scary thing if you have a a house full of fish tanks or a fish room. The idea that the power could get knocked out in the middle of the night when you're not paying attention because you're sound asleep, and the heat go down and all the heaters go off and all the filters go off is a pretty scary thing. I know there are some people that have the wherewithal to have systems in place that will effectively kick on a generator if all the power goes off, that will effectively kick on a generator to run the fish room stuff with. But my fish tanks are scattered throughout the house. Cobwebs is not getting any audio. Okay, I've had a bunch of people tell me it was okay. Maybe you've got your audio off, or maybe something's happened. I'm not sure. Let us know, Cobwebs, if you might try reloading. If you can't get any audio, let us know and we'll see. No one else is saying all good for the audio on my end, Laura says. Yeah, I always check first thing because audio is one of the issues with XSplit, which is the program I use to broadcast with. So I am dreading this winter. I've just reached the point where I'd rather be too warm than too cold in my age, and slipping and breaking a hip on ice is not something I look forward to. Okay, Cobwebs. I'm glad you could get in one way or another. So I would caution people in the northern hemisphere. I know some of you are in the southern hemisphere and you are coming on to summer right now, and I'm jealous. But for those of us in the northern hemisphere, in the United States and Europe, I think that we should gird our loins this year and be ready for it to be a severely cold winter. It could turn out not to be. It could turn out to be a mixed bag, really cold sometimes and really warm sometimes. The global warming that the planet is experiencing, deniers or not, is known to create extremes in weather, the excess heat, and it generates stronger and stronger weather effects in local weather. So tornadoes are more powerful, thunderstorms are more powerful. It just creates a situation where when it's cold, it's really cold. When it's hot, it's really hot. And that's how global warming affects our local weather conditions. Climate is pretty much global, but weather is pretty much local. So weather conditions in our local areas can be much more extreme than normal in a situation where the atmosphere is superheated and the ice caps have melted or are in the process of melting or don't refreeze back like they should. Um, it just creates a tension in the weather where everything that happens, or a lot of the things that happen, become much more extreme. So deniers tend to say things like, well, it's 30 below here now. How can there be global warming? Global warming, climate change, whatever you choose to name it, will create more intense extremes in weather that is local. Doesn't mean that it happens all the time with every storm, but the hurricanes are more intense, can be more intense, snowstorms. Ray's Fish Room says, Dwayne, have you had this experience on new tank setups with CO2 and heavily planted? Readings come back very acidic, like 6.1. My other tanks, as they mature, are running 7.3 pH. Is it because of the CO2? Ray, to full disclosure, I have never run. Hey, Mob Guppy, welcome to the stream. I have never run CO2 on any tank that I have ever kept. And I am also a brown thumb. I have a very hard time keeping plants alive. And it may be, the more I've studied, the more I've begun to realize that it may be because I tend to run tanks with a lot of splashing water, a lot of atmospheric exchange created by the way I run my tanks. I tend to splash water off the sides. I tend to run wave makers on the surface. And those things, my studying of Diana Wallstead's books and several other major plant, most of them are women, interestingly enough, tends to state that if you have too much air exchange in a tank, bubblers, wands, air wands, all that sort of thing, they will create a situation in the water where a lot of the minerals that the plants need get exhausted out of the tank by all that atmospheric connection. But I would tend to agree with your idea that the readings are coming back acidic because of the interaction between the CO2 and the plants and the water is creating a situation where the calcium is and the carbonate in the water are being extracted by the plants heavily, and it creates a situation where the water can vary. Now, pH, if you guys listen to Lucas very often, Lucas goes by TDS, not pH, because pH is per hydrogen. That means how many hydrogen molecules are in the water. And anything that you do to create a disturbance in the water that creates more surface air to water connection, where there can be evaporation, where there can be gas exchange, the more you do that creates that sort of situation, the more likely it is that the hydrogen molecules in the water will be released. Now, a pH of 6.1 is slightly acidic, bordering on acidic, and a lot of fish like that. A lot of fish require that because if they're wild caught, they're not used to base or neutral pH, because there are a lot of diseases. There are a lot of parasites that can't exist in acidic water, but can exist in base or neutral or higher pHs, and the fish have no defenses against these. Now we're talking wild caught fish here, and we're talking some species that are particularly, like Ultima angels. Um, oh, what are the new tetras that everyone loves that come from just like 4.0? Those fish will have a difficult time surviving in a higher pH. So your acidic water is deleterious to some fish, but it is helpful to others. And my experience with fluctuating pH is that it is caused by a fluctuating carbonate hardness in a tank, and that allows the water to not be as stable as normal, and that will cause your pH to drop. Now it can turn around and go right back the other way if you introduce maybe coral, bleached coral, or pieces, or shell pieces, or some kind, Texas Holy Rock, some kind of carbonate hardness to the tank so that the water can once again extract that carbonate hardness out. Sneezana says, I don't think it will be a typical cold winter here when I think about the extreme summer it has been. Yeah, that's another part of the equation, that the summer's been, although our summer wasn't all that bad, but it was extremely hot and it had dry periods in it. Cobweb Caverns is wanting to rant that some aquatic soils can muck up the pH quite badly, and that is very true. Whatever substrate you are running raised fish room, it may be adding to your problem instead of helping your problem. Cobweb Caverns asks, do you guys in the U.S. get your water companies to publish the data from the mandatory testing? Cobwebs, I know that there are areas where for a certain amount of money, like $5 a month or $10 a month, you can pay to the water company and be added to their list of people that get periodical reports on the water, like once every couple of weeks or something like that. They'll release a report and notice changes in the water for you so that you can have some idea of what's coming in your water. There's nothing like that in my area. The United States is made up of 50 individual states, and each state has its own idea about how it wants to do things. So what happens in one state doesn't necessarily happen in another state, and it all depends on what your locale is, if you can get water reports. And my experience here in this area is that I have to drill in and get to the people inside the water company whose job it is to monitor water quality to get any kind of response at all, other than the quote yearly water report that they put out, which could just as easily be a re-up of last year's water quality report. There's no indication that anything changes from year to year, and you really have to just call and keep asking for supervisors and keep asking for people until you get to someone who says, yeah, that's what I do. I monitor the water quality for the area. And then you're talking to someone who at least has some idea about what's going on with the water in your local area. At least they have some option to give you those details. Cobweb says watching football as well, and by that I assume you mean Euro football. So, Cobwebs, the answer to your question is no, not really. It's possible. It's possible to get reports from water companies, local water companies. Right. Yeah, it's hit or miss here in the United States, and it's due to the differing states have differing standards. They don't want there to be a national standard that forces them to do one thing or another. I think there are national standards, but they're not really location specific in the way they're written, so that so that we don't really have a common way to get reports on water quality. You know, it's a lot easier to let corruption flourish if there's no national oversight of states and what they do. It's a lot easier for corruption to get by without the country itself looking into what the states are doing. So states tend to defend their rights vociferously. They don't want any of those national Fed boys telling them what they have to do. So it's a mixed bag here in the United States. I mean, there are water quality standards so that the water is supposedly good for us to drink. Of course, there's always outliers like Michigan, places where people are drinking water that they open the tap and fire comes out of the tap with the water. Hey Nisi, how's it going? We have the hostess with the mostess here with us. Nisi is in Alaska, and I won't say where, but she is in the great state of Alaska. And Alaska has a great many differences from the rest of the country because it's up there by itself. So she says you can take a water sample to a water company to have it tested here. I'm on a well, so I don't get a report from the state. And being on a well is much different than being on a community water supply. Well, Nisi, welcome to the stream. While for the most part, people that are on well water have an advantage over those of us who are on a community water system, in that there are not chloramines and all the chemicals and treatments that they run on our community water. But wells are their own mixed bag as well. You can very easily get pathogens in a well. You can very easily get certain kinds of viruses in a well. And once you have them on a well system, it's pretty hard to get rid of them. It's really difficult to treat those sort of things. So it behooves anyone. Yes, Flint, Michigan is in a mess. But there have been some changes at the top in Michigan. So we can hope that democratic thinking will prevail in that area once more, and that the corrupted officials will be dealt with, and the situation for people will get better. Now, that's no guarantee that that's what's going to happen, but at least the voters have spoken, and they have removed the governor, and they have removed some of the people in the House that were part and parcel of what was going on in Flint with the water supply, where they basically just ignored it and let it get worse and worse and worse and didn't care, because none of those people that were dying from the water had enough money to focus their attention on it. Now, perhaps the people that are in power will be forced to do their jobs once again. Hey, Heather Nelson, welcome to the stream. Pam says, I had some friends that moved into a house with an artesian well under the house. They had the water tested, and it turned out the pipe from the toilet was leaking and getting into the well. Yeah, those are the kind of issues that you are forced to deal with if you have a well, because you never know what can cause issues. I think that it is incumbent on well owners. Hey Joseph, welcome to the stream, man. I haven't caught your latest video yet, but I will soon. I've been wrapped up in a lot of different things here lately, and I've been so busy that my time on YouTube has been cut drastically, but I will catch it soon. And welcome to the stream. If you've got any questions for me, Joseph, I'd love to hear them if I can try to help. We've kind of been talking about water quality. I named my channel Water. I mean, it's my name, but after my name, it says Water, because it has always been my belief that I learned long, long ago that basically, as fish keepers, we take care of the water, and besides other things like feeding, the fish take care of themselves. You know, we take proud ownership of the fact that our fish bred, but it's the fish that are doing the breeding. What we're doing is creating a situation where our fish are able to thrive and do the things that they would normally do, the things that are in their nature. So basically, as fish keepers, what we really are is water keepers. And I think that as long as we study and observe and watch our water quality closely, you know, I mean, we all have lives and we're busy and we're doing all kinds of other things. Sorry. But we all need to take time to observe the water quality in our tanks, to observe how our fish are thriving or not thriving, so that we can catch problems early, so that we can resolve situations that will potentially occur because of issues with our water quality, or issues with the behavior of our fish, or the loss of fish, or the signs of diseases just getting started. All of those things go hand in hand with us being able to create a situation where our fish can thrive. I mean, it's one thing to just keep fish alive, they don't die, and while that's highly laudable, and a lot of people have to work a lot of years just to get to the point where their fish don't die. You know, they buy fish, they put them in a tank, they're fine for 2 or 3 months, and then they start dying. That is a laudable achievement, to get to the point where they no longer die after 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever the case is. But our job, our responsibility as fish keepers is to create situations where our fish not only survive, that they actually thrive and are able to go through their normal breeding processes and their normal behaviors that they would experience in nature. And to do that, we need to be heavily engaged in the water quality that are in our tanks. And that's a process of observation, that's a process of testing, that's a process of pre-testing the water before it goes in the tanks, so we know if there's an issue. If your local water supply has suddenly pumped a ton of chloramines into the water because they had some issue at the sewer treatment plant, or some issue in the viral development in the water supply itself, then we need to catch that before that water goes into our tanks, because we will just do our normal water change and treat the water as we normally would with prime or whatever we use as a water conditioner. Well, Daryl, I hope it doesn't snow too much, and I hope that your cold doesn't go too far. I've always been a strong believer of taking zinc when you feel a cold coming on. It doesn't cure the cold, but what it will do is make the cold last much less time. You can basically cut the time of half that you're going to suffer from a rhinovirus in half by taking zinc. And there's all kinds of zinc gummy bears and lozenges and tablets out there that you can take. Nisi's work gave her a 2.6 nano. Grats, Nisi. Sounds like a good shrimp tank. I've been having this same water quality talk over and over and over again with the coworkers. Yeah, it's one of the basic fundamentals of fish keeping. You know, people think fish keeping is just buying the equipment, throwing the water in a tank, and then picking out what fish you want to look at and dropping them in the tank and watching them swim and feed them. And that's all there is to this hobby. But nothing could be further from the truth. And it's probably one of the first things that rank beginners need to learn is the nitrogen cycle, how to recognize when there's enough beneficial bacteria built up in a tank to keep their fish alive, and how to maintain water quality. You know, there's some things that we can buffer, there's some things that we can treat, but mostly water quality depends on the quality of water coming out of our tap and the amount of water changes that we do in our tanks. When you get to a point where you have high nitrate readings in a tank, nitrate, you are basically faced with a situation that unless you have a huge plant load pulling that out, you basically can only rid the tank of that problem with water changes. And if you do a 50% water change, you will cut that amount in half. If you do a 90% water change, you will cut that amount by 90%. So we need to be extremely aware of how to deal with the different kinds of situations that arise in the water in our tanks, the different methodologies that we can use. You know, people are always talking about pH and wanting to buffer pH, but my experience is buffer chemicals are very mercurical, that you can put them in and show the right pH on one day and the next day go back and the pH will have dropped entirely too low again. I moved from Texas to Indianapolis, and I knew that the water in Indianapolis was very hard, so I stocked up on pH lowering buffer stuff before I got to Indianapolis. I had 500-gallon tubs of fish and water in the back of my little pickup truck that I was towing behind the truck that I was driving that had all my stuff in it, all my tanks, all my furniture. I set up my 150-gallon tank, and I had about I'm going to say by the time I got there, I lost about 6 on the way. I'm going to say I had like 200 Dempseys, Jack Dempseys, when I got to Indianapolis. And I set my tank up, the 150-gallon, and I used half water from the totes that I had brought up with me, and I used half tap water. And then I buffered it, and I took a chance that there was enough beneficial bacteria in the gravel and the filter material that I had left in the totes that my beneficial bacteria was going to be all right. And I dropped all my fish in that 150-gallon tank, and I buffered it down from 7, 8 down to 7, which was basically what the water pH was from Texas. It was a little bit low, but I wanted to over buffer it because I wanted it to hold so my fish would have a chance to get used to it. And I got up the next morning and 3/4 of the fish in that tank were dead, and I checked the pH and it was right back up to 7, 8 again. So the buffering that I had put in only lasted about 4 hours and then went straight back up to the top again and killed my fish. And I ended up losing almost every one of the Jack Dempseys that I had been carrying. The lines I had been carrying for over 10 years, I lost almost all of them. So buffering pH is not a great way to handle the situation. If you want your pH to drop, you're better off adding wood to the tank, dead leaves to the tank, a lot of plant material to the tank, maybe even a substrate that is known to be slightly acidic so that it begins to drop in the tank. Give Doug a hug for us, Nisi. If you want to raise the pH in your tank, it is my belief that you are far better off using crushed coral in a bag or as part of the substrate, Texas Holy Rock, which releases calcium into the water in an acidic situation, or crushed shells. You can save old snail shells and put them in the tank that has acidic water and watch those shells dissolve. And the rate of how fast they dissolve will give you an idea of just how much calcium is being released into the water. I've watched many a large golden snail shell or apple snail shell dissolve in my tank. So, well, I can't even remember what question I'm answering now, but I just, how you deal with water quality is a very big issue for fish keepers. And a lot of people have it managed to such a level that it no longer becomes an issue for them. You know, they've got a fish room and they're all on the, everything's all set up to function properly. But it's dependent on us doing lots of water changes. You know, if you ask Jack Watley, while he was still alive, he would tell you that you need to do a 50% water change every day. Now, I've never been one to follow that just because of the wherewithal and all the buckets I would need to carry, but it gives you an idea how much water change is really needed. Hey, Jeff Rose, welcome to the stream, man. I missed your live stream the other night. The Pacers were playing. You came on just when the Pacers game was kicking off, and I sat there trying to decide, am I going to watch Jeff Rose or am I going to watch my Pacers play? And I'm sorry to say you lost out, man. Nisi says she's planning on letting the plants in the nano tank take off before adding shrimp. I don't want to worry about killing the culls. Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that, Nisi. I would say that a newly set up tank needs to fully go through the steps of brown algae and into green algae and develop a lot of green algae on the inside of the tank before you even think about adding shrimp or fish or whatever you're going to do. And that's usually a period of time lasting about 3 months. And I say that because the shrimp will graze on algae like a bunch of cows on a field eating grass. The shrimp don't eat the algae, but they eat the microorganisms that gather and live on the algae. And I just firmly believe, I came to shrimp keeping very late, and it wasn't something that I tried until a couple of years ago when Lucas just forced my hand and made shrimp keeping so much fun that I couldn't say no, and I ordered a Skittle pack from him. I was very leery about them. I was very concerned about their well-being. I was very concerned about doing water changes. I was very concerned about doing anything in that tank that would cause a colony collapse or, you know, any deleterious things to happen. And so I waited 3 months on my shrimp tank. I set the shrimp tank up, I got everything running, and I waited 3 months before I put shrimp in that tank. Nisi says, well, I've had this tank since the summer. I just had it seeding at home with snails and plants. But then I decided I wanted to show my coworkers how patience pays off if you do things correctly. Way to go, Nisi. Seriously. It's, there's always situations, and I hope no one takes my snooty, holier than thou, potentially attitude as that, because there's always going to be a situation where you're bringing fish to a fish show, and you don't have 3 months to, let the tank season out and the fish survive. So there's always going to be times where you need to set up a tank and get it up and running right then. And so you're going to use, yes, Pam, I know I'm so snooty. I mean, it's impossible for us as human beings to not be holier than thou about some things, uh, to look down our noses at people that keep dye-injected fish or hybridized fish or have treasure chest bubblers in their tanks. All that stuff, Technicolor yawn gravel, clown puke gravel, all those things are us going through a process where we have advanced in the hobby enough to know that that's not for us anymore, So it's hard not to look down our nose at people. So I try my best to not let myself fall into that trap, to not say, oh, this person's begging for money on their YouTube channel, and so I think less of them than I would normally think of them. Those kinds of things are issues that we fight as human beings, and we have to work at it continuously to not be snooty, to not look down our nose at other people. The old saying, you never really know someone until you walk a mile in their shoes. That's very true. We never really know. We have our perceptions, what we see, what we think we perceive. We have our preconceived ideas about what this means and what that means. But we never really know. We never really know until we get to know that person personally and walk a mile in their shoes and see what it is that they're actually going through. So it's hard. You have to really work at being not snooty. You have to really work at being open to the idea that you can learn something from a rank amateur that just started the hobby. Those kinds of things don't come naturally to us, and we have to go the extra mile before they come natural to us. Cobweb's Cavern says peat brings the pH right down, and that is very true. Thank you for adding that. I have often set up tanks that I wanted to have a low pH in them by putting down a couple of layers of peat on the bottom of the tank and then adding my gravel or my under gravel filter and then the gravel on top of that, so that the peat at the bottom had a chance to interact with the water and then drop the pH. Who is Pete? Pete's a guy that you can get in a bag, Pam. You order him up and he comes in a bag. And Pete has a bunch of uses. You can also use sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss will lower pH. There are a bunch of things similar to peat Plants in general will lower pH because of them losing leaves or rotting, because of them pulling calcium out of the water or pulling carbonate hardness out of the water. Those things are natural ways to lower pH, and I think they're critically important tools in the fish keeper's arsenal when they're dealing with a species that they want to have lower than their tap water pH or higher than their tap water pH. All of those things are good things to use. All right, we're winding up once again to the top of the hour. If anybody has any last minute declarations or questions or points they'd like to bring up, I'd sure like to hear them. Another 10 minutes worth of me ranting about a subject is what's required here. I'm always grateful for you guys giving me topics to wander on about. I know that I often take those topics and turn them into something else, something that I'm wanting to talk about. Hey, Corona Ken, welcome to the stream, man. You're tagged in at the end, my friend. How's the fishing going? Have you closed it down for the year? I know the weather's starting to set in up there for you guys. I don't imagine you do much ice fishing up there. I'm enjoying all the reports that are coming in from AE. Ray's Fish Room says that could be part of it, Dwayne, the melting of some plants in the first few weeks. And yeah. Oh, man. Can we all stow away with you, Corona Ken? Ken's getting to go to the Southern Caribbean to continue fishing. Wow. I have done deep sea fishing off the Miami coast. I had a great uncle that was a huge fisherman. He was a lawyer. He lived in South Carolina, Asheville area. And I guess that's North Carolina, I'm sorry. He lived in Asheville, North Carolina. And he would take us fishing, bass fishing up in the mountainous areas up there. And one summer he took us deep sea fishing, and we went out past where the continental shelf drops off. I know we went that far out. And I was so sick, so seasick, that I literally spent most of my fishing time on my knees at the gunnels, ready to puke at any minute. I took a friend of mine from the neighborhood, and that guy was even sicker than I was. I was just a kid. I was probably 13, something like that, and we were just pathetically ill. Corona Ken says he did a whole lot of tank maintenance over the last few days to get ready. Well, Ken, I hope you enjoy the heck out of your Southern Caribbean fishing expedition. It sounds like a wonderful trip, and it sounds like the perfect time of year to go down there and do that. I'm highly jealous. I'd love to lay on some sandy. Aha! Ken says surf fishing is his speed for the same reason. Yeah. We used to, down in Florida, they had what they would call box fishing. You put a bunch of bait in a box that floated, and you would cast it past the breakers, and the tow would take it out deep, and once it got out far enough for your bait to be in deep enough water, you would jerk on the line, set the line and jerk on it really hard, and it would open the box and dump the bait and the excess line out. And then the box served as a sinker. After that point, the box floated, but all the bait and line, extra line, would drop into the water, deep into the, maybe 300-400 yards out, 500 yards out. You'd set that and snap it. Cobweb says, I have no problem with any of those things apart from the dye-injected fish. That's barbaric. It is barbaric. It's a sad commentary on what people want to buy. That's basically what it is. It's a crying shame. But people want to buy a phosphorescent colored fish, or one that has spots all over it of a wild variety of colors. All right, guys, we're winding up towards the top of the hour. I hope that all your fish keeping problems and situations work out to the best. I hope that maybe some little part of this hour-long rant has offered you some insight into fish keeping. I never know whether I'm doing right or wrong. I just cut my mouth loose and let it rant. I always kind of try to get back to a certain topic. Once we get one going, I try to... Nisi says, thanks for talking in my ear while I got stuff done. Nisi, thanks for being here. All right, guys, let's wrap it up. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And good luck, YouTube.